I don't know about you, but I think it is easy to get lost sometimes. Do y'all have somebody in your family who's like just terrible with directions and gets lost? I mean, you can give them, they could been to the place 100 times, but they still end up lost. You're traveling along, you're focused, maybe you're in a deep conversation, and then without realizing it, you missed your turn. And you got to drive, especially if you missed your turn on a bridge headed to New Orleans and Louisiana, you got to wait a whole 30 minutes before you can turn around because you can't turn around in a swamp. And that's why you shouldn't move to Louisiana. Next thing you know, you end up in either the deep forest of Endor or Mirkwood, or as my brother would say when we got lost, in Oklahoma. True story, when he was about Connor's age, we got lost in downtown Dallas, and we just kept going around in a circle. And my dad couldn't figure out how to turn right. He just kept turning left. Everything looked the same, and my dad is losing his cool, and my mom is trying to keep him calm, and my brother blurts out, "What's wrong?" And she says, "We're lost." And he goes, "Oh, we're in Oklahoma." And it wasn't until I was in high school my senior year, and my dad let my brother go with me to visit my grandparents, who live in Arkansas. And they live up in the northwest Arkansas, Springdale, Fayetteville. And when you drive up there from Longview, you got to go up through Oklahoma, up the only mountains that exist in Oklahoma, and then you end up in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas. Well, at this time, they were blasting through the mountain before you had to drive through the small towns. The interstate just ended. And so you either go into the mountain and crash your car, or you make a turn and you go through the towns. Well, they finally blasted through and made a highway right through the mountain. And on the way back home, we decided we would take the shortcut and go through the mountain. How cool that would be. Well, the road then, right when you get outside the mountain, you've got to make your exit if you want to make it to Texas. And we didn't know this. So we just stayed on the highway we were at. 30 minutes later, we passed this sign that says, "Welcome to Oklahoma." And I turned to my brother and I go, a bit of irony here. We're lost, and we really are in Oklahoma. So that is our fun family joke. So it is easy to get lost when traveling. And I think the same can be said of one's spiritual life. And that is what I would like for us to talk about this morning. I would like us to talk about 3 different types of being lost. And the first is that not all who wander are really lost. Our story this morning picks up as Jesus is having dinner with the tax collectors and sinners, people he shouldn't be having dinner with. And the people he should be having dinner with, all the good God-fearing folk, are upset with him. How dare he eat or associate with such people? Doesn't he know better? And Jesus hears this murmuring, and he responds with 3 different parables about the lost. The first is of a sheep that wanders from the herd, and the shepherd must go and find it. And he leaves behind the 99, and he goes after that one. He looks far and wide for this little lamb until it is found. And typically when we hear this parable, we think of those who are not with us, those who have wandered off and gotten lost, or those who have not yet joined the fellowship. And in the shallow end of the pool, this interpretation works, but as we swim further out, which I would like for us to do this morning, we begin to see our first type of being lost. In the first book of the Lord of the Rings, Frodo meets a wayward stranger dressed in a green hooded cloak, bearded, disheveled, shadowed figure at the prancing pony. And he sits off in the corner, and the man is called Strider, but that is not his true name. Before arriving at Bree, Gandalf tells Frodo in a letter that read in part, "All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost." Frodo doesn't know this when he meets the mysterious Strider, that he is meeting the true king of Gondor. It is not until Bilbo, his uncle, tells him that he wrote the poem after Strider revealed his true nature as Aragorn, the king. And the poem reminds us that not all who wander are lost, nor, I'm skipping ahead a minute, not all who are seen are found. We believe the sheep the shepherd is searching for is one who has never known the shepherd. But how can the sheep answer the shepherd's call? How can the shepherd expect the lamb to answer his call if the sheep never knew his voice? By the way, one of Eileen's sheep got loose a while back. That thing does not respond to my voice. No matter how many times I told it to shoo, it just stayed and chewed. And not until she does, I don't know if you ever heard her do her call. I can't do it. But when she does this call, they all come a-running. It reminds me of this story. Because you see, in our technological age, we are bombarded with different voices daily. There are so many voices speaking, it is hard to know if you are truly following the voice of the shepherd. Especially with all the Christian voices that are in our world. It is hard if you ever stood in your local bookstore to pick from the vast voices in print under the section Christianity. Not all who wander from the herd are lost. They simply have lost their way, and they need someone to show them the way back home. And it reminds me of this story. One Sunday morning, this is a true story. One Sunday morning, a pastor was heading to the worship service when he passed a prominent member going the opposite way to the front door. And the pastor stopped her and he asked, "Not staying for church?" And that pastor voice, that type of voice that makes you, it's wanting to strike up a conversation, but I'm going to make you feel guilty for going home. And she smiled and said, "Well, this morning I watched the preacher from Houston, and he preached about money and how I could get some. And on the drive in, I listened to the preacher from Alabama on the radio, and he preached about how this country's gone to the toilet. And then I got here and heard my Sunday school teacher preach about how the world is ending and the signs where to look for. I have no idea what you plan on preaching this morning, preacher, but I need to go home, because I ain't sure I heard Jesus at all today." Not all who wander are lost. They are simply wandering from voice to voice in hopes they finally hear the voice of the shepherd. And not all who wander are lost, not all who are seen found. There are good people who attend daily church meetings, watch their religious shows, and listen to only a certain radio station, vote for the candidate who mentions Jesus, but they mistake attendance, television programs, radio stations, and politics to be the true measure as one who follows Christ. They too have listened to the many voices, but what they've done is they've picked one that they feel fits them best. Yet the voice they listen to daily has never really introduced them to Jesus, to the voice of Jesus. They know what Christians are supposed to be against, at least from that voice's perspective, but they know nothing of what we are to be for or to be about. This voice claims to speak the words of Jesus, but what it really speaks are half-truths and unchallenging thoughts. This voice has led them to chase the golden road of wealth and power, of security and prejudice, of flag-waving and idol-worshiping. And this year marks the 50th year of the Civil Rights Movement in 1963. And you've heard me speak on it so much that you might be just tired of me talking about it. But for today, endure me one more time. Because 50 years ago, on this exact date and day, Bobby Frank Cherry, Thomas Blayton, Herman Frank Cash, and Robert Chambliss, members of the United Klans of America, planted a box of dynamite with a time delay under the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, near the basement. And about 10:22, 26 children were walking into the basement assembly room to prepare for the sermon entitled A Love That Forgives when the bomb exploded. 4 girls, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Lee Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley were killed. And 22 others were injured. And it wasn't until 1977, 2001, and 2002 until 3 of the 4 men were finally convicted. The 4th died before they were able to take him to court. 4 little girls lost their lives because these men listened to the voice of their imperial wizards, of other members who sadly were mostly white Protestant Baptist preachers, and to the voice of a governor who declared segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. They listened to voices who believed the true faith of Jesus was one in which you keep those who are black, Hispanic, Arab, gay, mentally or physically handicapped, homeless, poor, hungry, sick, or in prison, separated from the good, decent church folk. Those voices know no more of Jesus than those who wander in the forest and search for the voice of Christ. Another true story. There once was a college student who volunteered at her church to be their youth minister. And after a few months, the church gathered up enough funds to put together a little stipend for her. And it wasn't much, but for her it was enough to feel that she found her calling. And there were a group of teenagers who hung around the church skateboarding, and on one occasion they were seen smoking. The newly appointed youth minister approached the teens one day and began to strike up conversation. And in her conversation, she discovered the struggles in their life, and she began to minister to them. And as they talked, as they got to know one another, eventually they grew to trust her, and they found their way inside the church. And one particular Sunday morning, they sat in the balcony because she was going to preach her very first sermon, and they wanted to show her that they loved her. And as she approached the pulpit, they cheered and smiled, yelling, "We love you! You're awesome! You're the best!" And every one of those good church folk turned and gave him that look. You know that look your mama gives you when you talk in church? And immediately after the service, the deacon chair pulled her off to the side and said, "If those kids wish to ever come to here again, you need to tell them to behave. They need to sit there quietly." She never had that conversation, and the youth group grew. And those teenagers began showing up to church week after week for service, and during the week after school. And many in the congregation grew uncomfortable because she never told them not to smoke in front of the church or to watch their language or not ask their questions. She loved them for who they were. Eventually, the time came when enough of the good church folk complained, and she was fired. The kids left, and all that remained were those who were seen but were never found. And it leads us to our third one. Those who have been shelved. After he finished with the parable of the lost sheep, he shares another story. Suppose a woman has 10 dimes and loses one of them. Won't she get the flashlight and a broom and sweep and look carefully till she finds it? In Toy Story 2, and I know this because this is Connor's favorite movie that we have to watch over and over and over and over again. I have it memorized. At the beginning of it, Woody is shelved because his arm is ripped during playtime with Buzz Lightyear. And Andy's mother puts Woody on top of the top shelf to stay there until he can be repaired. And Woody's upset. He's sad. He doesn't get to go to Cowboy Week with Andy. And while sitting there on the dusty bookshelf, he hears a soft squeak from behind a book, and he discovers Wheezy, a forgotten little penguin that you squeeze that goes, hee, 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 who had been waiting for a new squeaker. He had been forgotten. There are those in our fellowship, in our faith, who get lost in the woods because of the barrage of voices. As with them, there are those who become lost because their squeaker gets broken. They have stumbled or fallen, and they find themselves judged by the voices in their faith community to be found wanting. They are with us until they hit a bump, or until we hit a bump and they are knocked out of the pocket, kicked to the side, and become lost in the dusty corners of the bookshelf, and then remain there, forgotten, until we got to clean the house up, and then we notice them. Now, being a Christian, I've said this before, is a very hard task. And besides discerning through the infinite voices, various voices of leaders in our faith community, we are saddled with great expectations, not only by the world, but sadly by other Christians as well. We are expected to live to a higher standard than others, and when we fall short, as we all do from time to time, we are not met immediately with kind voices, but with harsh voices. You should know better. See, this is why I don't go into church, because of those hypocrites. Too many of us struggle with the false perception that the Christian is to lead a perfect life, and if their house is not in order, they are told by others that they are really not a Christian. But instead of being told or seeing a messy life as a life that looks lived in, as Betty Waffney told me one time when she came over and the house was a mess, she said, "Oh, it's all right, looks lived in." We need to tell others that your life looks lived in. But instead they are told that they need to get it all together before they can serve on a committee or serve as a deacon or stand up and preach or even attempt to follow Jesus again. Life is already messy and hard, and being a follower of Christ makes it even harder and messier. I can't imagine. You see, I think it's different for me because on a daily basis, this is what I do. I prepare worship services. I sit with you. We talk. I guide. I am a pastor, and so this is a daily part of my life. And I couldn't imagine what it is like for those who do not have to do such. I do not imagine what it's like. It's hard for me to imagine the difficulty of having to go to work, come home, be a husband or a wife, be a father or a mother, cook, clean, keep a house in order, pay bills, do every adult thing, and then on top of that, these unreasonable expectations of everything you have to do around here. I can't imagine how difficult it would be for me if I had a real job in which I had to go work 40 hours a week, 9 to 5. To make it here on a Sunday morning, you should be commended because it is hard. There is a voice that tells us not to believe what we heard this morning. There is a voice that says we are unable to return to Christ. A voice that says Christ's love is conditional, small, and selfish. Christ's mercy is for a few elected. Christ's grace is only for those who pray the ABCs. The voice tells us that God will not keep his promise. A voice that says Christ is not strong enough to be faithful. And we listen to this voice over and over again because it is so loud, so penetrating, and we convince ourselves that we are unlovable, unwanted. We believe our imperfections, and our imperfections we were born with are imperfections that we believe are too much for God. We seek reassurance that Christ is who Christ says he is. We seek reassurance that Christ will keep his promise. And we seek reassurance that Christ is strong enough to stay faithful when we get lost in the woods, when we wander from the herd. And each time we seek reassurance, we hear this voice that gets louder and louder. It says there are no returns. There is a no return line. Once you leave the arena, you can't get back in. And those are the three general types of being lost. And each one hear that voice. And here, though, Jesus offers good news. And that good news is the time has come for us to raise the voice of the shepherd, of Jesus above the other voices so that the lost may hear his voice and return home. For you see, in these parables, the shepherd, the old woman, they do not form a committee to search for what they lost. They do not elect a government official to care for them while they attend to the other 99. They do not complain about how in their day sheep didn't run off like this. And dimes, they didn't fall out in your pockets because jeans, they were made right back then. No, the shepherd searches day and night until he found the lost lamb. The woman swept and cleaned and moved heaven and earth until she found the lost dime. They searched and searched until they found what they were searching for. Jesus wraps up his story time with the good church folk upset he's hanging out with those sinners with a story about a man who had 2 sons. And the younger son decided he wanted his inheritance, and he took off somewhere like Las Vegas. And he spent his money on women, wine, and having a good old time. And he returns home broke, destitute, hungry, desperate, and lost. He returns home simply to survive. No pure heart in this matter, but yet while he is still off, the father sees his son, and he doesn't walk, he doesn't crawl, he doesn't send a servant. He runs. He runs to him. He embraces him, kisses him, clothes him, shoots the fatted calf, and celebrates. And if we listen to the voice of the shepherd, to the old woman and the father, then we hear a distinct voice that comes out of the darkness. One that says, I am your God. I have molded you with my own hands, and I love what I have made. I love you with a love that has no limits. Do not run away from me. Come back to me. Not once, not twice, but always, always and forever again. For you are my child. How can you ever doubt that I will embrace you again, hold you against my breast, kiss you, and let my hands run through your hair? I am your God, the God of mercy and compassion, the God of pardon and love, the God of tenderness and care. Please do not say that I have given up on you, that I cannot stand you anymore, that there is no way back. It is not true. I so much want you to be with me. I so much want you to be close to me. I know all your thoughts. I hear all your words. I see all your actions, and I love you because you are beautifully, wonderfully made in my image, an expression of my most intimate love. Do not judge yourself. Do not condemn yourself. Do not reject yourself. Let my love touch the deepest, most hidden corners of your heart and reveal to you your own beauty, a beauty that you have lost sight of, that will become visible to you again and again in the light of my mercy. Come and let me wipe your tears, and let my mouth come close to your ear and say to you, I love you. I love you. I love you. Have y'all seen the new, I think it's a Dodge commercial for a new Dodge pickup truck? It's rainy, and you see this man, farmer, cowboy actually, puts on his cowboy hat, his long duster, walks into the rain, and it's telling you all about the truck. But the truck doesn't matter. What matters is he gets in the truck in the middle of the night. It's raining, it's dark, and he goes searching. And he's driving through anywhere and everywhere, and he's looking for something. And finally he stops at a bridge. The rain is pouring down. He gets out, he's drenched and wet, and he walks over, and there's this little calf stuck in the mud down by the river. The cowboy bends down, picks it up, puts it in his arms, and the ending shot is the cowboy walking back to the truck with this calf in his arms. I don't know if those advertisements folks go to church, but that is our story in a nutshell. Let us remember not all who wander are lost, not all who are seen are found. And let us not forget those who fall out of our pockets and get kicked to the side. Christ's voice must be above the others. The light must shine in the darkness. Let us pray.